I'm making this video for two reasons. One, I want you to know what detoxification methods work, and I want you to know what detoxification methods don't work. Because if you don't know this, you'll spend a lot of time and energy doing stuff that doesn't work. And two, I want you to know when something is detoxification and when something isn't detoxification. And to understand this, you have to understand how detoxification works. What I see in the health community in general is people blaming their symptoms on detoxification. And the reason they do this is so that the burden of responsibility goes away from them. They don't have to do anything. They just have to wait and it will all be over. No, this is not the case. Usually people are wrong. When you say it's detoxification, it's usually not detoxification. What it is something in your environment that you're overlooking, and once you stop doing it, once you stop eating this thing or that thing that you thought was healthy, all of it goes away. The first question we have to ask is, what is detoxification? And with detoxification, it's quite simple. When stuff that isn't supposed to be in your body leaves the body. But to be more specific, these things, you might think, okay, but what harm are they doing in the body? What they're doing is making your body less energy efficient, okay? So a state of health, the greatest state of health is the state of the greatest energy efficiency. So you can run your systems really well, spending the least amount of energy possible. So you have really strong and efficient cells that recycle energy really well. If you have pollution in there, let's say, or something in there that's not supposed to be there, that will make your cells less energy efficient, even though the pollution isn't circulating around. Maybe it's stored in the bones, in the bone marrow, or in your skin, or in your brain, let's say. The fact that it's stored there, again, is a decision that your body made, but it's making the body less energy efficient. So if we were to remove this, if we were to detoxify it, we'd become more energy efficient, and that is what you associate with greater energy levels, better sleep, better vision, less brain fog, more intelligence, better athletic performance, easier breathing, better resistance to anything in nature in general. We have to distinguish between different forms of detoxification. There's induced detoxification, which is when we do stuff to get pollution out or get something out of the body. And induced detoxification, so us taking an action to remove pollution, can come in two forms. Either we're supporting some system in the body or we're literally forcing something out. So with support, you could be increasing a certain nutrient in your diet, or you could be supplementing it, although I don't necessarily recommend that. And this would support your antioxidant systems, and then you'll be able to clear out more stuff, let's say. Then there's the forcing. You're making a decision for your body by manipulating its systems rather than letting your body do the work. Sometimes the net effect of this can be positive, sometimes not. The other distinction I want you to make is that sometimes you have pollution that's in your environment that you can't necessarily avoid if you live in modern society. A plane flies over some field and you get titanium dioxide in the air, and then, that eventually reaches the soil, and then you consume that. There are heavy metals all over nature, even in nature reserves, unfortunately. Even in fairly clean areas, like in the March region of Italy, for example, there's a bunch of heavy metals in the bees, according to a certain study that I read. They analyzed the bees and also their honey, and they found heavy metals in a very clean nature reserve with no pesticide usage around it, with no cars, and nothing modern, let's say. No human activity in the sense of people polluting the place. Then there are your own mistakes. And of course, both of these, the mistakes you make and also the unavoidable pollution, the unavoidable pollution that really is unavoidable, both of those will get detoxified. Both of those will eventually lead to some symptoms in you because your body has to handle them somehow. But with the unavoidable stuff, you'll get symptoms, But in many cases, you'll think that it's the unavoidable stuff because you don't know that you're polluting yourself. You're not aware that that tattoo is toxic, for example. You're not aware that your deodorant or your shampoo or your conditioner, your perfume, whatever it might be that's toxic. You're not aware that it is toxic, and then you're getting these symptoms, and you simply don't know that this thing, this mistake that you're making is causing your issues. But it doesn't have to be these classic examples of pollutants. It can be leaky gut, which we'll go over later in the video, but if you know what leaky gut is, basically it creates a bunch of pollution inside you through your gut that's damaged. Damaged gut, food isn't digested correctly, stuff goes into the bloodstream that shouldn't be there, and then you have to detoxify that. And this might be coming from something as simple as dairy. You might be consuming raw milk thinking that it's very healthy because someone said it, and then now you're inducing leaky gut and you have all these symptoms and you're saying, oh, it might be that the raw milk is detoxifying my mercury. No, my friend, it's the raw milk causing leaky gut that's causing all these symptoms. Okay, you remove raw milk and you don't get this. The secret formula to detoxification is understand, eliminate, and then add or replace. That's the secret formula. You have to understand what's happening in your environment. You have to eliminate what shouldn't be there, what's causing your issues, or what is a source of pollution, let's say, or what's causing more pollution to be added to the system through leaky gut, for example. And then you need to add or replace the things that, let's say, you removed here, you replace them with other things, and then you add certain things, which could be a detoxification protocol, like going to the sauna, for example. But it's not about the detoxification method. That might be helpful. It's about looking at your environment in total and seeing what's a source of pollution, what's causing damage, and then adding the stuff that you need to add to fix these problems and to support overall health. That's how you do it. It then follows that without understanding detoxification, you won't be successful at it, because you won't know if your decision is actually supporting it. You won't know if your problem is detoxification in the first place. You have to know how detoxification works, what determines it, for you to make good decisions. That's already, unless you're lucky and you just stumble upon the right thing without understanding why it works. But in any case, what controls detoxification and whether the body will do it successfully or not is energy. Why? Well, let me give you an analogy. Let's say you have a plot of land and you need to cut down a few trees. There's also some trash. You'll need excavators. You'll need people to come and help you, because you don't have the necessary tools to do it in a good span of time. If you do it yourself, it might take several years, because this is a big plot of land, let's say, and you have plans for it, right? If you have a lot of money, you can do everything you want, because you can hire the appropriate people, the people who have excavators, the companies that do that kind of stuff, to clean up whatever it is that you need to clean up. If you don't have a lot of money, you might have to do it yourself. Now, will you be able to clear out the things you need to clear out, do the things you need to do with a plot of land? You might be able to, but not quickly, or not effectively. Not effectively enough for you to, let's say, get the desired result. Whatever you envisioned for this plot of land that you bought, you're not going to get there quickly. So the point of the entire operation isn't happening. And now if we link this to detoxification, the land is then your body. The things you need to change is the detoxification, the stuff you want out. And then the money is the energy. And then the goal, of using the land is how you feel, right? You want to feel a certain way. You want better skin. You want better hair. You want a more beautiful body. You want to be more intelligent. What are the results that you're getting? And that's really what we're trying to get to with this analogy. Now, I never explained why it is that energy controls detoxification, but it's quite simple. This doesn't take long to understand. If you try to remove something toxic from some part of the body, obviously that's not free of charge. You need to spend energy doing that. There are certain cells, like immune cells for example, that will bind or, engulf this thing, then it needs to be transported, and then it needs to exit somewhere. All of that requires circulation of the lymphatic system, the cardiovascular system, activation of the nervous system, the correct signals to be sent. All of that requires nutrients. All of that requires electrons. An easy example is just glutathione levels. Unhealthy people have really bad glutathione levels, while healthy people have very good glutathione levels. And they don't even need to use it that much as well. So not only can the unhealthy person not produce glutathione, they also need more of it, while the healthy person has no problems producing it because they have a lot of energy to fuel that pathway, the entire glutathione pathway, and they need to use it less than the unhealthy person. That's really the case. So not only do they have more nutrients, they also usually have an environment, so everything that's affecting their body, that makes it so that they need to use the pathway less, because they have less stuff they need to clear out. Now, in essence, what is it that we're getting at? Because there are many detoxification pathways, and we don't need to get into all of them. So what is the essence of it? With vitamin C, with vitamin E, you might have heard that they're antioxidants. With glutathione, you might have heard that it's the master antioxidant of the body. What is antioxidation? Oxidation is the loss of electrons. So antioxidation means preventing the loss of electrons. That's really what it means. You're preventing oxidation. And these things like glutathione and vitamin C and vitamin E and the antioxidants donate electrons to things so that they don't cause damage to the body. Because what do these pollutants do? They take electrons away from molecules in the body, and what happens is a chain reaction. Oh, okay, we have this molecule in the cell, then this pollutant comes, steals some electrons. Now this guy wants electrons, so he steals from this guy, and the entire chain breaks down. And suddenly, you have brain fog. Now, I told you that the energy levels in your body determine how much you can spend on detoxification, how easy that is going to be. I also told you that you need electrons. Now, what if both are the exact same thing? You see, yes, we do produce ATP. You might know that our mitochondria produce ATP, and in standard biology, we say that that's the energy currency. Now, there's a guy called Gilbert Ling. There's also a guy called Dr. Gerald Pollack. They sort of are very prominent water scientists. You may have heard me talk about Gerald Pollack before. I've even talked to the guy. I have an interview with him. God bless him. The forerunner to his water research is Gilbert Ling. Gilbert Ling started the work on water. He was the one who questioned if ATP is the actual energy source in the body.
Scientific research is not just fun. Scientific research really can save human lives, and that's very important to me.
Gilbert went on to hold prominent positions at world-renowned institutions. Over decades, he formulated a radical new theory on the workings of the cell titled the Association Induction Hypothesis. This theory purports that it's the special arrangement of water and proteins that account for the molecular activities of the cell, and not the pumps and channels of a membrane. But rather than being taken seriously, his controversial theory marked the dismantling of his career.
It took me 5 tries. I finally worked out what he was saying, and it's, phenomenal.
I think Gilbert Ling is a genius, and he's an immensely intellectual, honest man.
His contributions to science are so immense that he should have been given a Nobel Prize.
He was really like a litmus test for how anti-scientific a professor was, how readily they would dispose his whole position.
The most interesting thing to me is how to make what I discovered to last to the future generation. Because the worst condition, when I pass away, the whole thing will just disappear. But I intend to be here a longer time. Okay.
And what he did is he did calculations on whether it is plausible that we produce enough ATP to fuel our bodies. Is ATP the thing that is able to provide enough energy for us to move around, think, digest food, see stuff, use our brain, etc.? What he discovered is that no, it's not possible. And since he was a water researcher and he knew a lot about water, he did a lot of work on water and realized that yes, it's the water. The water is what holds the energy. You see, your water in your body isn't in the form of the water you'd see in a glass. It is ordered or structured. And this happens because you have external energy in the form of light, the magnetic field of the earth as well, charging the water, affecting the water in a way where it separates into water that is positively charged and negatively charged. Now what does that remind you of? A battery. And in the negative charged water, we have a bunch of free electrons. Okay, so the water in your cells, you have a bunch of free electrons. It's negatively charged water with a bunch of free electrons. Now these electrons can power the mitochondria, the electron transport chain, to produce ATP. But ATP's role is different. We don't need to get into that. But the energy comes from the water. So what am I telling you? The more charged your water is, the more you charge the water, the better. And you're going to notice that many popular detoxification methods do just that. And so you're extracting electrons from water and you're increasing the total energy level in the body as well, which means that you become a very, very good detoxifier. Again, you get the electrons to make sure that these things that steal electrons from you don't steal electrons from you, and you have enough energy to run the cellular processes that would make it so that you can take pollution in your body and make sure that it gets out of the body without damaging anything on its way out. If you don't have enough energy, of course your body realizes that, so it needs to store it somewhere, and it never goes out. But if you have enough energy, it gets dealt with when it comes in, or if you have stored pollution, your body has enough energy to clear it out. This charge in your cells, again, can be high, and it can be low. And this is called redox, redox potential. If you have high redox, when I say high redox, that means you have a bunch of energy in your body stored in the water. That is where your energy is stored. Low redox means, or bad redox means, you don't have a high net negative charge in the water in your cells. You're not storing a lot of energy in the water. Unhealthy people have low redox. You know, people who can't get it up? Low redox. People with low energy levels? Low redox. People who are very toxic, who can't clear anything out, people who have, who are severely sensitive to anything, are very not resilient, low redox. People with brain fog, low redox. Leaky gut, probably also low redox. I should mention that the person who coined this term is Dr. Jack Kruse. God bless him. There is one exception to this rule. And that rule is that, yes, detoxification is dependent on energy, as long as we're not talking about microorganisms. Bacteria don't need to necessarily use the energy that's stored in your cells. They will process stuff independently because they're a separate organism. You could see it as one total organism because without them we would be nothing, and without us they would be nothing. They live on our terrain. It's like, if you think about it like this, without the earth, we would have no life. We would have no humans. Because where the hell would we live? It's the same thing with the bacteria. Without us, as the earth, as Mother Earth to them, they wouldn't exist. They wouldn't have a role. Like we take care of them in our digestive tract, right? And they take care of us. Microorganisms are some of the most amazing detoxifiers you could ever think of. There's a very persistent organic pollutant called glyphosate. Glyphosate is a pesticide that Dr. Stephanie Seneff extensively talks about. I've done an interview with her. You really need to check out that interview. Glyphosate is a very big issue. You need to avoid the countries that use a lot of glyphosate. You need to avoid farms that use a lot of glyphosate. This is one of the worst pollutants out there, and it's very hard to detoxify from because of its mechanism of action. It turns out that one way of getting rid of glyphosate in the soil as well as inside of the body is through microorganisms. There are microorganisms that eat up glyphosate, that take it and use it as an energy source, turning it into other stuff that's not toxic. That's just energy to the bacteria, and then when the bacteria have used that stuff up, the byproduct is useful to us. And in Stephanie Seneff's book, Toxic Legacy, she talks about how there are yeasts and bacteria strains. I believe it's mostly yeasts. I'm not sure if there are also bacteria strains that eat up glyphosate. And it's one of the best ways to naturally get rid of glyphosate. And the same things happens inside of you. And that's why glyphosate is such a big wrecker of the digestive tract. Because first of all, it's antibacterial. So maybe it wasn't bacteria that break it down. Maybe there are some bacteria that are resistant that break it down, but from what I understand, there are yeasts that break it down. And so it causes a yeast overgrowth. Now think about yeast overgrowths in general. We think of it as, okay, this is something bad, we need to get rid of the yeast. Is the yeast the problem? Or is it that the yeast is actually performing an important function? You might understand now that if you have a yeast overgrowth and you live right next to a farm that uses a bunch of glyphosate, you might understand why that is. The yeast overgrowed in there, not only because you killed a bunch of microorganisms with the glyphosate, it's also dealing with the glyphosate. And so if you have small intestinal bacterial overgrowth, SIBO or Candida, or any type of yeast problem, it might be that you've been exposed to something that you shouldn't be exposed to. Unfortunately, you probably couldn't avoid it. And now this yeast is actually performing an important function. Now it might not be that. It might be that you eat a bunch of sugar and you've taken antibiotics, but it might also be glyphosate. Okay? And it's very hard to know which one it is. The best way to know if you are someone who eats a bunch of carbohydrates and sugar is to remove the carbohydrates and sugar. And if the yeast persists, you know it's not the carbohydrates and sugar, but usually it's because of your diet. You have yeast in your digestive tract, Candida. You have bacteria, which is obviously known. You have certain parasites, fungi, and viruses. You have a bunch of microorganisms in your digestive tract. In the book Gut and Physiology Syndrome by Dr. Natasha Campbell McBride, wonderful book by the way, highly recommended, she talks about how there are studies showing that when you give people antiviral medication, so medication that kills viruses, they get digestive issues. And we're talking about the viruses. Now with fungi, with yeasts, with bacteria, they don't consume energy, but with viruses, we produce them internally, and so they require energy. Now we're going to talk about the gem of this video, because this is a mistake I see people making all the time. They blame something on detoxification when it's not detoxification. And I know how to identify if they're speaking out of their ears. I don't want to use the rectum, I'll say ears instead. Or if it's actually detoxification. It's very easy to know. I'll give you the general rule. If you're doing everything the same way, and you feel great, and you've been doing the same thing for a while, and your bowel movements are very regular, everything is very regular, and suddenly, without you making any changes, you get this bout of diarrhea or constipation or a headache or some sickness, and you've changed nothing. And then after a while of you not necessarily changing anything, it goes away. And then maybe you get this again, 3 months or 6 months, and then it goes away. Or maybe once a month you get constipation or diarrhea without having changed anything, and then it goes away. All that is detoxification. Why? Because we've isolated all the factors in the environment, and we now know that since we've changed absolutely nothing, this was a decision by the body to do something. So we absolutely know that it was detoxification. Why? The only way for the large intestine to be disturbed in this way, because again, nothing in the environment has changed, is if the body's clearing something out, because that would be the only environmental change possible. Think about a cold or a flu. You're losing bodily fluids. Maybe you've got phlegm, maybe you've got mucus coming out of your throat, mucus coming out of your nose, more airwax, maybe you get diarrhea. Usually your bowel movements are going to be different when you have the flu or a cold or something like that. Your energy levels are going to be low, maybe you sweat more. You have all these symptoms that are indicative of stuff coming out of your body, and microorganisms are involved, and as we said, microorganisms do clean you out. And then when you get this big bout that is the flu or the cold, that is when you're actually clearing everything out. That is the process of you pushing it out. And it happens without you necessarily changing anything in your environment. That's how we know it's detoxification. Of course, we have to look at what the actual thing is, what the symptoms are, what's happening in the body. And with a cold and a flu, it checks out. It also checks out with it being random. It checks out with it not being caused by you changing your environment, or it being cured or completely disappearing by you changing your environment. Now, let's go to the raw milk example of leaky gut, etc. Some people believe that when they drink raw milk and they get a bunch of acne or they get digestive issues or diarrhea, that it's detoxification. Now, let me ask you this. When you don't drink raw milk, these things don't happen. Now, you drink raw milk and then you get these symptoms. Is it plausible that it's detoxification, or is it more plausible that it's actually the raw milk? Usually when my clients ferment the milk, should they wish to drink raw milk, okay, should that be some part of their diet? Should that be some part of their routine that they want me to fix? Okay, usually I don't go around recommending raw milk because usually it's not needed, honestly. But, and that might sound surprising to long-term viewers, but again, the more you learn. When I change the raw fresh milk to fermented raw milk, when I tell them to ferment it, oh, suddenly the diarrhea goes away, the digestive issues go away, and sometimes their skin issues also go away. Oh, so was it detoxification? No, it wasn't detoxification. It was the fresh milk causing these issues. That was the case. Why? Identify the patterns. There was an environmental change, and this coincided with the environmental change. And it's not random. It's being caused every time you drink the raw milk. So environmental change caused by the raw milk, okay, it's the raw milk. It's not detoxification. That's not how detoxification works. Your body won't suddenly decide to clear out the mercury in your brain because you drink raw milk. Another very important example is skin issues. Eczema, acne, you name it. Because what people think is that, or because of certain health practitioners, they think that acne is heavy metals and plastic and seed oils being detoxified through the skin. No, it's not. Acne and eczema and all these things are a combination of leaky gut, and leaky gut comes from a bad light environment, and that's also influenced by nutrition. It's a complex story. Both are important. And this video deals with skin issues. So you have to watch that video to understand the issue. But once you watch that, you might notice that I never talk about detoxification in that video. And the reason is because acne isn't caused by you having a bunch of pollution inside of you. Not necessarily. And 99% of cases, that's not the case. What is the case is that these people have leaky gut. They have perforations in their small intestine or intestines in general. And then when food comes, undigested food particles pass into the bloodstream. This becomes pollution. A leaky gut creates pollution from the food you eat. I'm going to repeat that because it's important. A leaky gut creates pollution from the food you eat. It's not the heavy metals. It is your gut creating the pollution because of your intestinal permeability. So no, if you have pimples here and there, that is not detoxification from heavy metals or this or that. No. It's simply you having an environment that's creating leaky gut. You still have leaky gut, and you're probably also eating foods that are triggering it. And that's why you're getting these pimples, and that's why your skin isn't clear yet. I had this for many years because I didn't understand how the environment really influences the skin and the metabolic system. I thought, oh, this must be pollution because I believed certain health practitioners and I didn't listen to others. that I should have listened to. And what happened is that once I made certain changes that aren't related to this video, because this video is about detoxification, everything went away. Before you do anything, determine whether the problem actually is detoxification or if it's simply your environment making you unhealthy, causing these types of symptoms in you. Like you drinking A1 milk from Holstein cows, or fresh milk when you're not supposed to do it, or avoiding the sun, or let's say you use artificial lights at night, or at any given time, honestly, or you abuse tech. You sit on your computer all day or your phone, and you put that near the gut, which increases gut permeability, and then you get leaky gut, and then you get acne because you put your phone here or your laptop on your lap, and you radiate your goddamn intestines, and you increase the permeability, and then you eat and you turn the food into pollution because of the leaky gut, as I explained earlier, and then you get acne, and then you read Ogenes's work, and then you think, oh, this must be heavy metals. Let me continue doing what I'm doing. And then you never fix the issue. See the problem here? So you have to realize, is it detoxification or am I delusional? It might seem like I'm against dairy. I'm not against dairy. I'm against jumping to conclusions. I've had many clients that have consumed dairy, and I tell them, I think you need to remove dairy. And they remove the dairy, and then their symptoms go away. You have to understand how to use dairy. Dairy is a tool just like a hammer, okay? And that's why I made the raw milk video, so that no one makes mistakes with dairy. If the dairy is from A2 animals, goats, certain types of cows, Guernsey, Jersey, etc., buffaloes, and it's a healthy animal, they're not feeding it bad stuff, and you get that dairy raw, straight from the farm, hopefully, you don't store it in plastic, and you ferment it, usually you can do great things with that, given that you do an experiment and you see that you're not aggravating your symptoms. How do you know if the dairy is actually benefiting you based on your symptoms? Well, I'll give you an example. Let's say you drink A2 fermented raw milk and you feel really good. You feel like your digestion is better, you have more energy, but you get diarrhea, okay? You got diarrhea, but you have all this energy and you feel really well and the food is digesting really well. And then sort of 1 to 2 weeks later, the diarrhea goes away and you're not always getting the diarrhea. Obviously, it's benefiting you. Yes, you're having diarrhea, sure, but you're not having any other digestive issues, you're not having any skin issues, you're not having any brain fog, you're not having anything else that's associated with digestive issues. On the contrary, you feel better, which means that no, in this case, the diarrhea might be detoxification based on the overall assessment of your symptoms, based on your situation. So you have to learn how to distinguish between these things. Use the principles I've laid out in this section, and I believe you'll be quite successful. I'm guessing that if you made it this far into the video, you're finding it helpful. If that's the case, and if my videos have helped you in any way, I just want to point out that I have a private community on School called Excellent Health Academy. If you'd like to know what the community entails, what's in the community, what we do over there, click the first link in the description and then watch the video. Now we're going to get into how detoxification works, or more of the finer details, let's say. So let's begin with hair mineral analysis. Why is it even possible? Well, what is hair mineral analysis? It's when you cut off your hair, not everything, but just a part of it, and then they analyze the hair and they tell you what's in it. And people usually use this for a multitude of reasons, but one of them is that they can see their mercury and lead and cadmium and heavy metal levels in general. Now, mercury is obviously not something we want in the body, right? It's not so good. It inhibits the brain from working by destroying neuron formation. It literally kills the brain, makes you stupid. So you don't really want it anywhere near your nervous system. If it's in the hair, what does that tell you? It's not in the body anymore, right? It's outside the body, unless you want to call the hair a part of the body, which it is, but you understand what I mean. It's not influencing physiology. This stuff right here isn't necessarily influencing physiology that much. At least not the biochemical processes inside the brain, let's say. So, you detoxify heavy metals through the hair. Cool, right? That's why you have these metals in there in the first place. If there was no mercury in your environment, you'd find no mercury in the hair. If you didn't detoxify mercury through the hair, you would find no mercury in the hair. It would be impossible to detect through a hair mineral analysis. And so my point with this is, hair is a detoxification pathway. This beard, this mustache, detoxification pathway. The biggest detoxifier is the skin, because of the surface area and because it's the way we interact with the environment. It's the thing that connects us to the environment, especially our light environment. We have a bunch of photoreceptors on the skin. But again, since stuff is constantly going out of the skin, or since we have pores and stuff is designed to get out of the skin, again, you sweat, etc., this becomes an amazing detoxification pathway. So the skin is another one. Then you've got your rectum, and you've got your pee hole. When you urinate, of course, you can eliminate stuff through the kidneys, and so you can use that pathway, because stuff is going to exit you. Same thing with your rectum. Stuff is going to exit you, so your body can use the digestive tract to detoxify stuff. That's why you get diarrhea or constipation, and sometimes it has a chemical smell, right? You might have noticed that when you're sick or when you have a really bad bowel movement, it smells really bad. That might be an indication that something bad left you. A common symptom of leaky gut is arthritis, and the reason is because, as we said with acne or skin issues, these undigested food particles are exiting through the skin. They're also causing a bunch of inflammation in general. Now, these undigested food particles can also be stored in the skeletal system, in the joints. So they accumulate there, and you get joint problems. Now, why is that? What is it that controls whether it gets stored or not? Because that's really the point here. If the body knows that if we detoxify this will cause more damage than if we were to store it, then it stores it. If the body determines that we can clear this out without using too much energy, and it will be far worse to store it, then it clears it out. So the body has to choose between storage and immediate detoxification. And that decision, I mean, this is really the beauty of nature, the beauty of the human body, mammals in general. Because of course, the body has a hierarchy of determining what's more important, and it can make the best decision in these very, very hard to determine situations. Like, let's say you get a whiff of perfume. And of course, perfume contains a bunch of carcinogens. How does the body determine if that's, where that goes? What it's supposed to do with it? Yet it does it, and it does it perfectly, and it makes the best decision each time. Cool, huh? So storage, or if it gets immediately detoxified, is dependent on the scenario that creates the least amount of damage. The body identifies that because it's like a chess computer that always makes the best move, and it chooses that pathway. Earlier I talked about Pollock, Gilbert Ling, I talked about the role of water and how sunlight affects it, right? The infrared light from the sun, charging the water, increasing your redox, and making sure that you can detoxify stuff because you have a lot of energy. Now, that's the infrared part of the story. Then you also have the UV side. Now, UV sort of has the same effect on water, but in a different way. But what UV gives you, UV light, is melanin. And did you know that melanin is one of the best things for protecting you against heavy metals because it's really, really good at binding to it? Okay? So if you want to detoxify from heavy metals, what you do is you sit in the sun, because then you're getting infrared, which is charging you, so you have more energy to do whatever it is you need to do with the pollution, and you're also getting melanin. And if you're getting melanin, then you have more of these guys that can bind to any heavy metal that's in your environment, and bam, you're protected, your brain is protected. This also means that water is extremely important in terms of detoxification, not only because it holds the energy, but let me ask you this, if your body's 70% water and you get pollution into you, where are you most likely going to find the pollution? Inside of water. So you're probably going to use water to clear stuff out. And also, you need the water to hold the energy in your body. If you're dehydrated, you won't be able to have as many electrons in your body. You won't be able to hold charge in your body. EMF dehydrates you, okay? It makes it so that you can't produce water in the fourth complex at the inner mitochondrial membrane in the electron transport chain, which means that you get dehydrated. It dehydrates you because you can't create water internally. Remember, if you haven't watched the water video, go and watch it. But as I said there, you take the acetyl-CoA derivative, so glucose or the ketone or whatever it might be, and oxygen, and you turn them into carbon dioxide and water. Again, it's the reversal of photosynthesis. We learned this in school, yet no one thinks about it in terms of health. You create water whenever you make ATP. That's really the case. So, that means that if you stop creating the water, that's a way of getting dehydrated. And that will make it far harder to detoxify. So to make sure you're protected from pollution and to make sure that you can clear it out, you need to avoid EMF so that you don't get dehydrated, and you also need to hydrate. Now, as long as you do it in a very good way and you drink high quality spring water, well water, mountain water, whatever it might be that's available to you in your environment, go ahead and drink that. If it's raw milk with whatever it might be with meals, that's also fine. Now, what determines whether you're dehydrated or not is a blood test. If you have elevated hematocrit and hemoglobin, then you're probably dehydrated. If, and especially if your bun to creatinine ratio is really bad, so we're talking 20 to 1 and above, then you're dehydrated, especially from EMF. If it's below 10 to 1, you're really good. If it's like 10 to 1, that's also good. The closer it is to 7 to 1, the better. To summarize this section, whatever it is that your body doesn't want, it will throw out. And your body throws that stuff out through every place where stuff can exit. So, if you have, let's say, a bunch of tooth stone, you have dental calculus, you know, the hard stuff, that's pollution. If you have stuff at the corners of your eyes, and when I say pollution, it doesn't have to be environmental pollution, it can also be pollution that was created through metabolic havoc inside of your body, or leaky gut, whatever it might be. It can be all of those things, okay? But it's basically anything that shouldn't be in your body. It can be the stuff you wake up with at the corners of your eyes, especially if it's excessive. If you have a lot of it, yeah, you know something is going on. It can be through the skin. Of course, acne is detoxification, but again, it's not heavy metals, it's leaky gut. It can be through the hair. It can be through the ears, through the earwax. It can be, again, through the urinary tract, through the kidneys. It can be through the bile, from your liver. It can be from your rectum. But the main thing is electrons. How many electrons can you hold? And that depends on your hydration status. If you want a good hydration status, you watch the water video. You make sure that you're doing good stuff with that water, which means being in the sun, getting a bunch of melanin, okay, so you can utilize the water even better, and getting a bunch of infrared so you can extract the electrons from that water. And this enables you to deal with pollution really, really well. That's really my best advice, honestly. This, again, as I said earlier, is called redox. If you improve your redox, you don't have to worry a lot about detoxification or pollution. Now we're going to talk about methods that work. Of course, redox is one of them, but let me just say this to begin with. There are many detoxification methods. Like, I'm not kidding. There's so much to learn. And, of course, I don't know all of it. I don't think anyone knows all of it. I mean, look, you've got the magnetism and DMSA, you've got Dr. Dean Bonley's work. In terms of removing heavy metals, I think that's amazing. You've got the iodine consumption that leads to you detoxifying halogens and you being able to protect yourself against all of that stuff and even radiation through iodine. Now, just a quick note on that, make sure you get it from seaweed and seafood. Don't take the iodine drops, you're not supposed to get iodine that way. With that said, I'm gonna give you the Pareto principle. The 20% that gives you 80% of the detoxification. But that's not really accurate, because I think it's honestly like 5 to 95. And what I mean is, 5% of detoxification methods give you 95% of the results, and 95% of detoxification methods give you 5% of the results. And just continuing on the detoxification methods pathway, I mean, there's diatomaceous earth, there's consuming clay, there's consuming other natural foods that boost certain detoxification systems or give you a certain nutrient that might, bind to stuff, etc. There are so many things. But there are fundamentals that all of these methods rest upon. So I'm not going to be talking about coffee enemas. I'm going to talk about the central stuff. What is it that really handles this stuff? That's what we're going to focus on. The number one most important thing, as I've said throughout the video, is redox. How much electrical charge do you store inside the water? Because that's your energy, and the more energy you have, the more you can clear the yard or the land you've bought to actually make it productive, to reach the goals that you want to reach, to actually have cows grazing there or animals grazing there, and for you to get the meat. That's why you bought the land in the first place, so you can live there maybe, or so that you can have a bunch of cows grazing there. That's really the case here, isn't it? Now you're asking, how do I improve redox? Yes, of course, if you're in the tropics, get sunlight, infrared light, especially in the morning and in the evening. The UV might be too harsh on you if you're someone who's been doing what people usually do in modern society. So the morning sunlight and the evening sunlight, not too much UV, bunch of infrared in the correct wavelengths, especially in the morning from what I understand. So get that and you'll feel absolutely amazing. That's why certain people are drawn to morning and evening sunlight way more than noon sunlight, because you don't feel like you're getting grilled because the UV is very low and the wavelengths are the ones that charge your cells the most. And so you absolutely love being in the sun in the morning. Now what if you don't have sun? What's the best way of getting high redox? It's very easy. Cold exposure. Now, in this community, cold exposure isn't understood. No one understands cold exposure. Everyone thinks it's a stress. It's not. You have to understand that cells recycle energy, okay? So your mitochondria, of course, will need to create a lot more heat. They'll need to work more when you're in the cold to keep you warm, sure. Now, let me ask you a question. What is heat? Infrared light, isn't it? That's what they're emitting, okay? Now, what's around the mitochondria? What do you have in your cell? A bunch of water. Okay, so remember how I told you that infrared charges water, increases redox, increases the electrical potential in the water, the negative charge? Cold exposure is doing the same thing. The mitochondria are doing the same thing, aren't they? So are you losing energy or are you recycling the energy? So could it be that you're turning your little mitochondria into suns and you're charging yourself from the inside? Yes. That is the case. That is certainly the case. You're turning food, mass, into electrons and protons, and then you're turning that into light, and then back into electricity again. Cool, isn't it? How the body works, how we utilize every little bit of energy from every process, and we recycle it. Maybe that's why we can live so long. Maybe it's because nature is absolutely amazing. This design is so amazing that we can do cold exposure without losing energy. How cool is that? Naturally, this is the solution to people in colder environments. You might have seen my videos and I always say that, oh, you want to heal yourself? Get a bunch of sunlight. It's the healthiest thing you can get. And you say, the sky is overcast, I live in Norway or the UK or Sweden or Finland or Russia and I don't know what to do. Get cold exposure. I've talked a lot about healing the gut using sunlight. You get sunlight from hair to hair and it's the best, so the hip bone to the clavicle, and it's the absolute best thing you can do for gut issues. Now I haven't told anyone this, but if you don't have sunlight, cold might do the same thing for your gut. Just try it out. Don't take my word for it. Just try it out, okay? See how your gut feels. But naturally, that's not the only way of improving redox. There's also sauna. There's sweating. Now, I'm not going to group that with redox. If you want more redox, go and check out this article, okay? It's Cruz's Redox RX, and RX stands for prescription. If you want, go and read that. Cruz is really the one behind these ideas, and I'm not parroting what he's saying. I've looked into each thing and I've read about it and I've tried it, and then, I feel obliged to tell you about it. Otherwise, you see, there are many things in my mind that I read about that I'm not sure about because maybe I haven't tried them, so I never mention them. If I mention something, then again, I'm pretty sure of it, but still, don't believe me, verify. Because your own experience, you taking action is really the important thing here. That's really why I make videos, so that you can change your life. My good friend Varis Ahmad made me aware of a study where they took men who sat in a sauna and had towels below them so that they would drip the sweat on the towel. And then they did an analysis on the towel and they found all kinds of heavy metals. Like an insane amount of heavy metals. So of course, there are heavy metals in our environment. There are a bunch of other pollutants that will leave through your sweat in the environment. And so sweating more is a very good idea. All you have to be aware of is when you sweat, you're not only losing bad stuff, you're losing good stuff as well. And when I say good stuff, I don't just mean electrolytes, sodium, potassium, magnesium, and calcium. I mean trace minerals that are pretty hard to get. Like you'd have to eat certain plants like, let's say, wheatgrass or kelp, seaweeds in general, or you'd have to dissolve some sort of high quality salt with a lot of trace minerals. So we're not talking about something from the store, that's just sodium chloride. No, we're talking about something like Celtic sea salt, which is like, 20% trace minerals? That's how you would replenish it. In terms of ways to sweat, if you have sunlight available, just do that. You don't need a sauna, you don't need an infrared sauna, you don't need any of that. You don't need to buy a portable sauna either. You don't necessarily need a hot bath even. If you can sweat in the sun, that fulfills the same purpose because you're sweating regardless. It's like, an infrared sauna. Of course, you're using light to heat up your tissues. That's what infrared does. Bam, doesn't heat up the air, heats up your tissues, and that makes you sweat. The sun does the same thing. It emits the same kind of light. And it also gives you UV. So not only are you taking care of a huge amount of physiological processes, not only are you increasing your vitamin D levels, not only are you increasing your redox and storing a bunch of, energy in your water, you're also detoxifying a bunch of stuff because you're sweating in the sun. Cool, right? So don't miss that. That's the easiest way to do sweat therapy, you could say. Now, the last way of sweating that I recommend, and one of the best ones actually, is using geothermal pools. Why? Well, there's a difference between a geothermal pool and a hot bath at home. The bathtub isn't grounded. Remember, water is very conductive, while a geothermal pool is. So when you're in that water, you're getting a bunch of electrons from the earth, aren't you? It's the same thing with swimming at the beach or a lake or whatever. When you do that, you're grounded. Maybe that's why people really like swimming in natural bodies of water. Because their body's getting a bunch of electrons, so they feel good, and so they do it time and time again. And of course, in geothermal pools, you don't have the government putting a bunch of nasty stuff in the water, because it's just natural water, and sometimes it's a sulfur bath. Sometimes it's naturally mineral rich, so then you suck in more nutrients. That's really the case. And this is actually called balneotherapy, going to geothermal pools or sulfur baths or whatever. And people report that, especially people with arthritis, from what I've read, they feel a lot better doing this. From the heat, from the infrared, from the sulfur, whatever it might be. There are many factors here to consider, but especially the infrared, they feel better. Now, of course, the heat in the geothermal pool will make you sweat, and so you detoxify a bunch of stuff, and that's great. Now, if you don't have a geothermal pool available, because let's say you're not in Albania or Georgia or a country that has those kinds of pools, Iceland is one of them that has a bunch of baths, then you just fill up your hot tub with 37 degrees Celsius water, or if you can't handle that, then go to a number where you feel fine. If you want to check the temperature, just buy a cheap steak thermometer from Amazon. That's the best way to do it, honestly. I do that for cold exposure so that I can control the temperature. And then you put it at the temperature you're comfortable at, and then you do 30 to 40 minutes, and bam, it's like being in the sauna and sweating a bunch of stuff out. And you might not think that you're sweating inside of the water, but you really are. Because when you get out and you smell your armpits, they usually smell, well, not so good. So that means that obviously you were sweating in there. It's just very hard to detect because you're surrounded by water. And put salt, natural sun-dried salt, and vinegar in the water. Whether these things bind to pollution or not, I'm not sure. So pollution that would be in the water. I mean, if you're in Norway or Sweden or Iceland or Finland and you have really clean water, Europe in general, you don't need to think about this. Although putting these things is beneficial. But if you put, let's say, natural magnesium salt or natural, let's say, sea salt, you'll be absorbing those minerals transdermally through the skin. So instead of eating magnesium or sodium, you can get it through the skin. And that's always beneficial because your body will take what it needs. What's better than detoxification? Not needing to detoxify in the first place, which means reducing your exposure to pollution. So let's just get the basics right. No processed food, of course. No cigarettes, no tattoos, and then no hygiene products that are toxic. So don't use bad soap, don't use shampoo or conditioner, especially perfume, even if you spray it on your clothes. If you can smell perfume, that cancer is going into your nose, okay? And then into your bloodstream, and then into your brain. Don't get that into you. No deodorant. Nothing with bad ingredients in it. You know those tissues? The standard ones that you blow your nose with. Those are also toxic. Toilet paper, also toxic. Washing detergent, also toxic. Dish soap, also toxic. Now, if you're someone who's not aware of these things and you're watching this video for the first time, you might say, well, now you're making my life impossible. No, not at all. It's just that the people you live with or you aren't conscious about these things, and so you haven't done the necessary work to replace these things. There are a bunch of people who have replaced these things. One of them, the most classic example in my opinion on the internet, is Paul Saladino. He has a bunch of videos where he shows, oh, I use this instead of that, etc. So he uses white vinegar as a washing detergent. He uses baking soda plus vinegar to, I believe, wash his dishes, also his hands maybe. I'm not telling you to stink. What I'm telling you is that there are a bunch of natural alternatives that you can use, that you can find, and they work perfectly. I mean, do I look dirty? That's up to you to decide, of course, but I can tell you that, you know, my hair's fine, my armpits don't smell, skin is pretty clean. You know, I shower with water, I use Aleppo soap, natural Syrian soap. It's got 2 ingredients in it, nothing toxic. I brush my teeth with water. Sometimes I use some natural fat that's unprocessed, of course, to oil pull. So I put that fat in my mouth and then keep it in my mouth for a while, make sure it goes around my teeth, and then I spit it out after like 10 minutes or something like that. And that cleans the mouth. There are a huge amount of alternatives that you can use. Paul Saladino has a bunch of them. I have a video that you can find over here where I talk about a bunch of alternatives that you can use. Just make sure to implement all of that, especially with toothpaste, especially with things you put in your mouth and also your skin. Those 2 are the most important ones. You know, even the eye drops you put in your eyes because they're dry or whatever it is, throw that in the trash. Don't use those things. But especially with your mouth, please use something natural. Make your own toothpaste. There are recipes out there that are pretty good. A big one is polyester clothing, just having plastic around you in general. So this, since it's hair, this is a blanket that's made of wool. So if I put this near my nose and I breathe, I won't be getting microplastics in. But there are blankets, usually those fluffy ones, that are made of plastic. What do you think they're made of? They're obviously not made of natural materials, they're made of petroleum. So you're gonna breathe in a bunch of crap if you use something like that. So make sure your sheeting or the places you're spending time in aren't composed of a bunch of toxic materials, and especially your clothes. I mean, if my shirt is over here, of course, I mean, I'm breathing the air that's sort of in this area, so that's going to be, I'm going to be breathing in stuff that comes from the shirt. So if the shirt is made of polyester, I'm gonna get problems. So this, 100% cotton. So just use natural materials like linen, wool, and cotton, and you'll be fine. The next thing to discuss is the liver, cholesterol, and fat, because those protect you as well. You might know that if you take some toxic pharmaceutical, it usually gets processed in the liver, and that's because the liver is this wonderful factory that can turn things that humans have created that are Frankensteins really in terms of chemistry. It can take it and it can turn it into something that you can actually clear out, that is sort of compatible with the systems in your body so that it doesn't completely poison everything. That's sort of what the liver does. But it's not just that, it does a bunch of other things. It's the transformer of the body. It's absolutely amazing. Now, one of the things it does is it produces cholesterol and the lipoproteins, etc. Now, you might know about LDL cholesterol and HDL cholesterol. Now, I'm going to tell you something about these two because you might have preconceived notions about them. One is not good and one is not bad. Both are very, very good. HDL is a measure of how well your liver is functioning and how well it is filtering the blood. LDL is simply how much stuff you have in the bank. How much can you use cholesterol to get other hormones? DHEA, pregnenolone, even vitamin D3, etc. That's really what LDL is. Or to be more specific, it's the cholesterol that goes from the liver to the cells, while HDL goes from the cells to the liver. So you can see how both are really important. It's like the train going back and forth, but they're a bit different in their structure. That's all. So whatever the modern medical establishment wants to tell you about these two is completely false because of the roles. I mean, you know the roles now. And they're both crucial for detoxification because, again, HDL is a measure of how well your liver is functioning. And of course, if you have a bunch of stuff around your body or in the blood or wherever it might be really, and it needs to go back to the liver, what's going to transport it back to the liver is HDL. And that's why I'm saying that it is a measure of good liver function. And I learned that from the Epipaleo RX, from Jack Kruse's book. God bless him, again. Wonderful book, by the way, highly recommended read. And of course, LDL and all these fat-soluble nutrients that you transport inside of the LDL, because it's not just cholesterol. LDL is a lipoprotein that's, water-soluble. It can flow around in the blood, and it contains a bunch of fat-soluble nutrients. One of them is cholesterol. So this guy goes around, and then these fat-soluble nutrients can bind to pollution and then take it out. That's really the case here. And of course, if you have damaged cells, you need cholesterol to repair them or to create new cells, really. And of course, with detoxification or anything involving any biochemical process really in the body, you're going to have cells that die, and so you'll need LDL to fix that. Otherwise, you'll degenerate. So it's a really good thing to have. Your levels should be, this is just my opinion, of course, based on, people I've looked at, based on Kruse's book as well, because the guidelines he puts there are really good, 200 milligrams per deciliter, above that. And in terms of HDL, I'd say you're fine if you're above 60. For HDL, you want UV, you want to get a bunch of sunlight. When you have high D3 levels, you usually have a good HDL. And also eat a bunch of fat, just a nutrient-dense diet in general. Animal food, seafood, both of those are really good. Don't eat garbage. Just eat an ancestrally consistent diet that's local and seasonal. That's all. Very easy. And get seafood. You want the DHA. Very, very simple. And then that also increases your LDL to these high levels. With the people who have low LDLs, I haven't seen anyone who's animal-based who has a very low LDL. Almost never. Only if they have bad hormones and they sleep badly and they're tired in general for some reason because of their environment. But as long as they're healthy, their LDL is always really high. And that's just a sign of health. Another huge thing is gaining fat. Why? Because you can store a bunch of stuff in fat, especially the persistent organic pollutants that are fat soluble. Okay, it doesn't have to be organic pollutants, just any pollutant that's fat soluble. So, for example, why do you think, there was something that happened 5 years ago, I can't really mention it, I think you know why, but there was this big thing, and people got stuff. It turns out that it wasn't the fat people who dropped dead, it was the very athletic people who dropped dead. Usually, their heart stopped working. It's because the thing that went into people created a bunch of stuff inside of the cell that really shouldn't be there. And if you have a lot of fat, it went in there. While if you don't have a lot of fat, of course, it went into the heart and the brain, right? So that's why, the fat people were protected. So having fat protects you. It's a very good buffer. So what I'm saying is just don't be very lean, especially if you're a woman. Don't be lean. You're supposed to have a high body fat percentage relative to what modern society thinks is normal. You should not have visible abs if you're a woman. For a man, if you flex, that's fine. If you're not flexing, you should not have visible abs, okay? Just have a body fat percentage. If you're a man, I'd say at least above 15%, something like that. If you're a woman, good God, you can even go up to 30 should you wish to. Just at least above 25%, that's what I'd say. Usually, the most fertile women, they're a bit higher in body fat percentage. And I think you know why. Now I'm going to tell you about the most overlooked pollutant out there. It's called deuterium. If you watch the water video, which you probably have in the middle of this video because of how many times I've mentioned it, because it's so relevant to what I'm talking about here, you might know that deuterium is a form of hydrogen that's twice as heavy and twice as big as normal hydrogen. Again, deuterium is the big one. Protium is what we call the normal one. Okay, but I usually say hydrogen for that one and I say deuterium for the big one. Why is this a very big story? Well, you have to understand that the way your mitochondria work, you're completely dependent on hydrogen. But the mitochondria are built for normal hydrogen, so you might imagine that when you make hydrogen twice as heavy and twice as big, you're gonna break the machinery in there. So if you have high deuterium levels, rest assured that you're going to have some kind of disease, you're going to have gut issues, you're going to have severe brain fog, and you're especially going to have very low energy levels. You'll feel fatigued, okay? If you have good deuterium levels, if you have low deuterium levels, I should say, you're going to have tons of energy. That's why, the people who are in the sun, who are in nature in general, because being in nature really depletes deuterium and makes sure that you don't get deuterium into you, or at least not high amounts. That's why those people have lots of energy. That's not the only reason, but the way I like to think about deuterium is that it's a very good measurement of your overall environment, your overall health. If you're doing things correctly, you're going to have low deuterium levels. If you're doing things incorrectly, you're going to have high deuterium levels. Now, one of the biggest things in terms of deuterium is your latitude, okay? If you live at a high latitude, the water is going to have a low deuterium level, or lower, I should say, relative to the equator. The closer you are to the equator, the higher the deuterium levels. That's not necessarily bad though, because for certain reasons that I won't get into here, that I've learned about recently, it seems like that's fine over there. You might need it over there, because it helps protect you against the sun, to some degree, because the sun is really, really strong over there. And you'll find that the food over there, again, the water is higher in deuterium, so anything that grows contains water, all the organisms, all the cows, the apples, the pineapples, or whatever it might be, is going to have that water in it, so it's going to be higher in deuterium. But there are also certain foods, especially fruits are the highest in deuterium, that are going to grow there, the tropical fruits, etc. They're going to be very high in deuterium, right? So if you're at the equator and you're eating these things, sure, as long as you're exposed to the sun, because sun depletes deuterium, you're fine. Now what happens is that the countries at the higher latitudes, the local food over there is dependent on the hydrology cycle over there. And the water in those latitudes is deuterium depleted, which means that all the food, all the meat is also deuterium depleted. You see where I'm going with this? These people need to eat locally. You need to eat locally, because once you do, you don't get the deuterium problems from the diet. Okay? That's why it's so important to eat locally, because then you won't run into the deuterium issue. That's just one of the reasons, but it's a very easy to comprehend reason. Because again, the hydrology cycle in Sweden affects the cows, and so the meat I eat has less deuterium than the meat that the Brazilians eat. But that's fine, because our environments are different. Our requirements are different. And make sure you eat seasonally as well, because of course, if you live in a temperate climate and it's winter, then of course you're not going to have any fruits around and you're not going to have any sun either. Well, you know, even in Sweden, we have UV, sort of UV 5 to 6, and also fruits growing. So I have enough UV, I have enough sunlight to offset the deuterium that I'd find in the fruits over here. See how that works? So if you're in Norway or Sweden or Finland or whatever it might be, you cannot do a Paul Saladino diet. If you want to do that, you go to Costa Rica. He doesn't emphasize locality and seasonality. He recommends that you eat fruit even if you're in the UK during the winter. He hasn't said no to that, so I'm just saying that. Nothing against him. Maybe this is not something that he's thought about. But again, now you know this. So don't get confused about nutrition, because it's really simple once you realize these things. Also, the most deuterium depleted, you could say, thing in your diet is fat, especially saturated fat from healthy animals. When they're grass-fed, they're more deuterium depleted. So, eat fat. When I did an interview with Dr. Laszlo Boros, a deuterium expert, it's on my channel by the way, he told me that one of the quickest ways to deplete deuterium is through cold exposure. So, I mean, sunlight is obviously a way of depleting deuterium, but if you live in a colder environment and you're saying, oh, I don't have sunlight, what should I do? I'm at a great disadvantage. Just go jump in the lake and you'll deplete deuterium quite a lot. I've been doing it the entire winter and I feel absolutely fantastic. With that said, go and achieve excellent health. I know you can do it.